Brad Keller was sitting at a gate in the Philadelphia International Airport awaiting his flight home after finalizing a free agent contract with the Phillies when his phone rang. It was Andy Pettitte, the five-time World Series champion and pitching coach for Team USA in the upcoming World Baseball Classic, and he was calling with an invitation for Keller to join the most talented American roster ever assembled. And in that moment, on a cold day in the middle of December, it must have dawned on Keller how much his life had changed in just 1 year. I'm Scott Lauber, and this is Phillies Extra, the weekly baseball podcast from the Philadelphia Inquirer. The Phillies are set to begin their third week of spring training here in Clearwater, Florida. Exhibition games are underway. Baseball is back on your television for the first time since the Dodgers edged the Blue Jays in Game 7 of that epic World Series. And I couldn't be any more thrilled or excited to have another terrific guest, new Phillies reliever Brad Keller. Don't know much about Keller? Well, you're about to find out, because after closer Jhoan Duran, he's probably the most important pitcher in the Phillies' remodeled bullpen. Keller is 30 and coming off a dominant season with the Cubs in which he became a full-time reliever, saw a nearly 4-mile-per-hour leap in fastball velocity, and posted a 2.07 ERA and 75 strikeouts in 69 and two-third innings. And after years of signing a conga line of late-inning relievers to one-year contracts, Juris Familia, Brad Hand, Corey Knebel, Craig Kimbrell, Jordan Romano, and on, the Phillies locked up Keller for 2 years and $22 million, making him the first free agent reliever to get a multi-year deal from Dave Dombrowski since Matt Strahm in the 2022-23 offseason. But it's impossible to watch Keller in his first Phillies camp and not think about how different things were for him a year ago. He was in Arizona last spring, trying to make the Cubs as a non-roster invitee on a minor league contract. It was the best he could do after missing time in 2023 with thoracic outlet syndrome and getting released in 2024 by the 121-loss White Sox, only the worst team in modern baseball history. So how did Keller get all the way from there to here? How did he become one of the best setup men in the sport and someone that Pettitte and Team USA manager Mark DeRosa wanted as part of the bullpen for the WBC? And most importantly, as it relates to the 2026 Phillies, why, after a wildly successful season on the north side of Chicago, is Keller confident that he isn't a one-year bullpen wonder? We'll get to all of that and much more momentarily in our conversation. Then, if you stick with me, I'll open my reporter's notebook and offer up 3 thoughts and observations from a busy-ish first 2 weeks of camp, in which the Phillies released Nick Castellanos, Bryce Harper arrived with some things on his mind, and a shakeup within the leadership ranks of the Players Association rocked the sport amid a looming labor fight that is threatening the 2027 season. And finally, as always, I'll take a listener question at the end. Right now, it's time for my sit-down with Brad Keller. Brad Keller, welcome to Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So as we do this, it's been a couple of weeks since camp opened. It's your first with the Phillies, of course, after coming over as a free agent in December. And you and I were chatting at your locker the other day when I asked you if you've given much thought to how much different your circumstances are from last spring, when you were trying to make the Cubs as a non-roster invitee. Now you've got a 2-year contract as a key member of this Phillies bullpen before heading off to join maybe the most talented U.S. team ever assembled for a World Baseball Classic. I guess it's all a testament to how much can happen in the span of a year. So I'll start with maybe the most direct question I can think of, which is what makes you confident that you can take this terrific year you had last year in Chicago and duplicate it and continue to build on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly it. Just continuing to build on it. I think kind of take what I did last year. I have a good set of cues that I was using all year last year, kind of even when I went through some ruts and things like that, that kind of got me out of it pretty quickly. So yeah, just trust the work that I put in, trust the process. I know obviously, the relieving lifestyles, it's not always, going to be perfect, but, ultimately we're just trying to do our job out there. So, just try to put up a 0. It might be some runners on, might have to battle through some traffic, but ultimately our job is to put a 0 up and pass it on to the next guy. So Yeah, just I think, just building on what I did last year and, kind of continue to get better. I've gone into spring this year, we're still working on some things. Last year, my sweeper at times was a little, um, not as consistent as I was hoping it to be. So this year has kind of been my point of emphasis going through spring is just kind of nailing that in, like really honing in, like when I want for a strike, when I want for balls, things like that. So just there's always things to work on. And I'm not just trying to like sit there and just be like, okay, last year's last year. It's like there is still even things last year that I would like to get better at going into this year. And so there's always, work to be had.
Yeah, I mentioned to you the other day that Whit Merrifield, a good friend of yours from your time together with the Royals, was on this podcast a few weeks ago, and he said, that he's told you for a while that he thought you could be really successful in the bullpen. And what's interesting to me is, as a full-time reliever last year, you kept the starters repertoire, the 5 pitches, but your fastball velocity jumped by almost 4 miles an hour. Instead of 93, 94, you were 96, 97. Number one, were you expecting that kind of bump once you were able to kind of go max effort for one inning at a time? And also, why did you choose to keep throwing the sinker too, in addition to the two sliders? You just mentioned the sweeper and, of course, the changeup. Instead of maybe taking a pitch or two and putting it on the shelf and saying, I don't really need 5 pitches as a reliever, maybe I'll simplify the repertoire a little bit. Why did you decide to stick with the starters mix?
Yeah, to the velo question, I feel like I was not expecting a velo jump at all. Honestly, I think health played a big part in that. I think I finally, as I told you before, is like finally
Yeah.
had a full healthy off season, kind of put the whole TOS thing behind. Really just focus on, getting stronger and healthier for the off season. So going into last year, I really even in camp, I didn't even expect a velo jump. I just remember throwing and they're like, "Oh yeah, your velo's pretty good." And I was like, I remember feeling like I still haven't even stepped on anything, and so, my first game last year in spring, I was like hit 98, 99, and I was like, surprised myself, honestly, but, no, it was great. I think health played a big part, and obviously, like, trimming down the roll, not throwing as many pitches, and really, kind of honing in a really good routine since surgery that kind of, allowed me to stay healthier, be able to bounce back a lot faster, and that's kinda helped out being in the reliever role. But yeah, to answer your question about the arsenal, I think I've been comfortable with throwing those pitches, my whole life. The sweeper was added last year, so really I was just 4 pitches. I've always thrown just 2 fastballs, so I don't really count them as 2 separate pitches. I mean, that sounds crazy, but in my mind, I'm throwing them the same, just holding them differently. Um, and then the sweeper was just last year was a way of trying to get more strikeouts, especially against righties. So and I feel like we accomplished that. So and I can't I'm trying to get some pitches, like, obviously, like, sinkers away to lefties are generally not a good idea, kind of a rule of thumb to pitching, but so having that changeup in there is really kinda helps me with lefties. So I'm 5 pitches, but when it becomes a lefty versus righty, it's more like 3 pitches to lefties, 3 pitches to righties type of thing, just, like, different repertoire. It's more so of, like, playing the, north-south, east-west game when
Sure.
we actually get into actually pitching. So it's in the grand scheme of things, it's 5 pitches, yes, but when you break it down to like, okay, lefties for the most part, I'm four seam, change up, harder slider. So just
Okay.
like 3 pitches to those guys. So
So in a way, it is simplified a little bit, just in
yeah.
terms of when you throw them. And I wonder if you could take me through free agency, because in talking to some people around the game before and during the winter meetings in December, I know there were a lot of teams interested in you, including some that maybe looked at you as a starter, a potential starter, or a guy who could be a swingman, maybe start the year in a rotation and then transition to the bullpen. It sounded like maybe you and Luke Weaver, who I think you guys are same agency and same
Mhm.
representation, that maybe you guys were looked at in a similar way. You wound up signing the exact same contract, you here and him with the Mets. What can you tell me about that free agent experience and why ultimately you chose to continue down the path as a reliever, which worked out so well for you last year?
Yeah, I mean the whole starter reliever thing was I was honestly kind of surprised by it. I know at the end of the year, I had a lot of guys, that I played with in the past and whatever that were in front offices and whatever, and they're like, do you feel like you can still start again? And it's like, yeah, of course, that's been my whole life. That's Been a starter all through the minor leagues, all the first part of my big league career. So it's like that's just like how I've always viewed myself. And last year, I even signed to be a starter with the Cubs, and then ultimately, we had to make roster decisions pretty quickly by going to Japan. So that kind of forced them to be like, hey, you either, go to AAA as a starter, or we potentially have a spot in the big leagues to be in the bullpen. So it's like at that point, I'm like, I'll do whatever to get back to the big leagues. So that's what put me in that reliever role. But yeah, I mean, it's had a couple teams reach out this year that was like, hey, we think that there's a chance that that you could still do it, and we believe that you could still be a starter. And as I told them, it's like, yeah, like I'm down to start. That's great. But I was like, I loved the bullpen last year. Like there was nothing like the adrenaline rush that you would get going into a game, big moment, big situation, like getting out of it, pitching in the playoffs, coming into big games like that. That was like, I mean, it gives me chills thinking about it because it's just such a special experience. And so part of me was like, I don't want to give that up. And I know, like, even when we were talking about the starter route, it was like there was always the fallback plan of being like, if it doesn't work out, we'll still just put you in the bullpen. But it was just like, I had success with it last year. I had success with it in the past, like at the beginning of my career. It's like maybe we should just like dive full in and kind of eliminate, because that was kind of like at the beginning of the last year, even when I was in the bullpen, I was still like the 2 inning guy,
Yeah.
still the long guy. So it was like still always that, am I gonna start? You know what I mean? Like that. So finally, when I felt like I put all those to the side and be like, okay, just commit to being in the bullpen, commit to being a reliever. That's when I feel like my season kind of changed. So
You
that's what going into free agency, that's kind of where I was like, all right, let's just commit to this. I really enjoyed it. It's not like something that I was on the fence about. Like once I was all in, I was like, this is a lot of fun. And I had a good group of guys last year that really kind of showed me the ropes, especially transitioning into like just a completely different role, being able to be ready every single day versus, one every 5 days or so. So that helped out a ton.
I think you just touched on it, but you closed out game one of the wild card series against the Padres, right? And you got a four
Mhm.
out save, I think, in game three against the Brewers. Can you describe the rush of getting the final out in a postseason game? What is that? That's got to be like, I guess the only thing better, right, is to close out a series, but you're closing out a postseason game, and it's not something that you had done before, and to have that experience, um, that's first. And then the second part of that question is like, how addictive is that? Like, if it wasn't going to be the Cubs, wanting to make sure that wherever you ended up was a team that was a contender, that you might have a chance to have that feeling again.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, to answer the first part, like it's hard to put into words what it felt like closing out games in the postseason, especially, in such an environment like Wrigley Field last year. But it was it was just unbelievable. In the moment, you're trying not to think of it, right? Like in the moment, you're like, I got a job to do. I gotta get 3 outs. Like I need to put up a zero here. But it's like once that last out happened, it's just like you almost it's addictive, right? Like you almost like black out and you're just like, this is the coolest experience in the world, right? And yeah, to answer the second part, it's like that's exactly my thought process going into this offseason in the free agency. It's like that was my first time winning, right? My whole career kind of wasn't on very good teams, record wise. I think we had plenty of good players. We just didn't put it together a lot of times. But so last year it was like you don't you kind of really feel the love of the game again, like the joy and the passion, and when you win it, it just is it's just amazing, right? And so that's what I told my agent going into this. He's like, what's your number one goal? And I was like, I want to experience what I experienced last year for honestly, hopefully the rest of my career. Like that would be ideal. I was like, I don't want to go to a place that's not in it to win it type of thing.
There are some big arms in this bullpen. I looked it up the other day. Joan Duran, I think, threw the third most pitches that were 100 miles an hour or harder last year. Jose Alvarado was 15th, and he missed a large chunk of the year, and he still threw that hard, that often. You threw live BP today. Jonathan Bolin went after you. After him was Backus, who's pretty nasty from the left side, and low arm slot, sidearm. What are your impressions so far of kind of the arms that you've got down there with you, and the potential that really this remade bullpen, because it's really bullpen and the outfield are the two areas of this team that are radically different from last year. Uh, what are your impressions of the group that you're going to have down there?
I mean, it's been amazing. Those guys, off the field are awesome. They're all great dudes. Been able to get close with those guys so far. I've been able to watch Duran throw most of his career. I actually knew him way back in the Diamondback days. We were both came up through the Diamondbacks together. So it's really cool to see his transition through his career because he was a starter back then, and then obviously he's one of the best closers and best pitchers in the game in my opinion. So fun to watch him throw, and same thing with Alvarado. I mean, he's been doing it forever, throwing 100 from the left side, like just electric stuff, and it's awesome. Like watching those guys throw lives today, I think Backus really impressed me. I mean, that was the first time I've seen him throw in person. I've watched him obviously on TV and just bullpens and here and there, but he threw live against the big boys today, and it was impressive work. So it's just that it kind of reminds me a lot of like what we had last year. And I hate to compare this to last year, but that's really like all I know. But it was just like a good collection of guys with all different types of release points stuff, everything, and I think that's what makes a fun bullpen, right? Like all different backgrounds, all different personalities, and just all come together, just be a bunch of grinders and a bunch of dogs down there. That's kind of just kind of the mentality that a bullpen takes over, and it's so fun getting to know these guys and watching, obviously they're disgusting and that helps out too, but they're also a bunch of good dudes.
I want to get to WBC and Team USA, but I'm curious to get your perspective on something else. It dawned on me thinking about this the other day. You were 22 and you skipped over AAA when you made your major league debut in 2018, and you had a really good year for the Royals that year. 3.08 ERA, you threw 140 innings. The Phillies are most likely going to give a 22-year-old rookie a spot in the rotation out of the start of the season. What do you remember about being in Andrew Painter's position, so to speak? And as a veteran, what's your advice for him about he did have more time. He had a full season in AAA, but 22 years old, he'll be 23. He's coming off of missing a couple of years, but he's young in the game, trying to make his way as a starter. What's your advice for him in order to do that as a rookie this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is just don't try to make it more than what it is, right? Just it's still the same game. You still got to throw the ball 60 feet 6 inches, right? Like obviously you got that extra deck. The lights are brighter. Obviously, you're facing guys that you've seen on TV or you've heard the name a million times, but it's the same game, right? Like you just got to put on that competitive hat and just go to work, right? And it's obviously intimidating when you're 22 and you're facing a bunch of guys, but for me, I was just trying to be a sponge my rookie year, just try to soak in as much information as it could. Good, bad. Obviously, you got to filter out that stuff, but you just try to enjoy every moment. Obviously, it's such a short time in our lives. A career span is so short in the grand scheme of things. So just try to make the most of it. Try to make all the memories. Try to soak in all the information. Obviously, we have a lot of veteran guys on our team, hitters, pitchers. I mean, especially in our starting staff. Like he's got a lot of guys around him that he can lean on, which is really cool to say. Knowles and Wheels and Lazardo and those guys. Like that's awesome to learn from and follow suit with those guys. But yeah, just I think just enjoy it. Obviously, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity, and like I said, it goes by fast. Like this is year 9 for me, and
Yeah.
I feel like I remember myself as a rookie walking into the clubhouse for the first time. So it's fun, but just like I said, just it's still the same game.
Okay, let's talk WBC. Team USA is loaded, obviously. And look, this time around, it's the pitching side too, right? With Paul Skeens and Tarek Skubal and Mason Miller and Clayton Kershaw and the other guys that signed up to do this. Tell me about getting that call from Mark DeRosa and from Andy Pettit. What was their sales pitch like? And what was your reaction to being asked to be part of this pitching staff?
Yeah, I was super surprised, honestly. I was obviously super blessed and humbled to be given this opportunity. I never thought in a million years that I'd be able to represent America on a stage like the World Baseball Classic. Like obviously it's our coolest, in my opinion, it's like our coolest thing that we do in the game. Just because we're able to have so many guys like the names you mentioned be able to go play in this, versus when we did the Olympics, like not a lot of guys were able to play in it. So I think this is our Olympics, right? So yeah, when I got the phone call, I was actually sitting in the airport in Philly right after I got done with my physicals and everything, and Pettit called me and was like kind of just gauging my interest. He's like, "Hey man, like, obviously your name's been popped up a couple times. Like, are you interested in doing this?" He's like, "We want to have guys that are fully on board, fully invested, and like not kind of, well, and I kind of expressed some concerns. I was like, I just signed with a new team. I don't know anyone going into camp. I'd be leaving spring training early. And so he was understanding with that. He was like, yeah, like I completely agree. So I kind of thought my chances were shot, but I was also like, I mean, I would be blown away to play for, Team USA. Like that would be amazing. Like obviously I was like, there's just some logistical things that we probably have to go through. And so I didn't hear anything from him for, I don't know, probably a month or so. And I was actually I was at a wedding down in Cabo, and I got a phone call, and it was nighttime in Cabo, and it was a phone call from Georgia, which is he DeRosa lives in where I'm from, and so
Right.
I look at it and I'm like, "That's weird. I shouldn't be getting a phone call from someone like this late from back home." So I just let it go to voicemail, and um, I was just sitting there racking my brains, like, who could be calling me type of thing. And so I got the voicemail and I listened to it and I got chills right away. It was awesome. He literally was like, he's like, this is, D-Row. So gonna go ahead and say we already talked to Dave. He's on board. Everyone on the Phillies is on board. It's like, give me a call back and let me know your answer. And I was calling him back. I didn't call him back that night. I was like, I texted my agent, texted my family, the whole nine. But called him back first thing in the morning and was like, that was probably the easiest yes. I said once everyone's cool with it, once he told me he talked to everybody, I was like, it's the easiest yes for sure.
Yeah,
So
I guess if Dombrowski says yes, that makes your decision a whole lot easier. You must have
yeah,
grown up
yeah.
kind of watching this tournament in a sense, right? I mean, I think this is like the generation of players that remembers the WBC when they were growing up, right? And
hmm
everyone remembers 3 years ago and the U.S. Japan in the final. I mean, what's your expectation for? It's truly as close as we've had, I guess, to a best on best style tournament in baseball, and you're going to be facing some really good hitters, and yet here it is. It's going to be March, right? So,
Yeah.
kind of like it's still spring training, but you're certainly going to be pushing down on the gas, I think, a little bit more at this stage, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it's and that's kind of what we were talking about. It's like I think everyone in this is invested in this, right? Like this is more than just a couple of games that we're going to go represent. Like we're trying to win this thing, and that's the cool part, right? We have, so many guys taking the time, especially, two guys coming off Cy Youngs, taking the time out of their build up to get ready for the season to go do this and be, fully ramped up in, mid March. So it means a lot to a lot of guys. And like you said, I think this generation, I remember where I was for the whole Adam Jones robbing the home run and things like that. Like I remember, you know, seeing that was the first time I ever heard of it. I think that was what 2015 or so.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember uh, watching that and being like, that is such an unreal thing. Like that's such a cool, moment. And that first time I ever heard about WBC. And obviously every year after that, I feel like it's just gained more and more traction. And then until, a couple years ago when that big showdown between us and Japan happened, that was incredible too. What a fun game, a fun tournament that was. So yeah, I mean, I think we're in this to win this, right? Like I think we got one goal in mind, and it's to walk out of there as a champion.
Do you have a theory for why more pitchers maybe decided to do it this time around, or why it seemed like, at least anecdotally, that there were fewer no's? I mean, does it have to do with there's a possibility that big leaguers will be allowed to play in the Olympics in 2028, and maybe this is looked at as like, hey, if I do this, I put myself in a better position to do that, or are guys just more geared up for the WBC because it's grown and grown over the years and turned into this thing, and it was so great in 23, and guys want to be a part of that now?
It's just gained so much popularity, and I think watching that tournament in 23 and just seeing just every lineup that was rolled out there was just star-studded, right? Everyone was involved, and everyone just saw the energy in the stadiums and the sellout crowds, like watching Miami sell out, Houston sell, like everyone just it was unbelievable, right? And so I think that's what really kind of drawed a lot of interest for this season and this WBC.
All right, maybe we wrap it up with this. Did I hear right that you and Merrifield went to the college football national championship game in Miami?
We sure did. Yep.
You're from Georgia. You're from the Atlanta area. Are you a big college football guy or a Georgia Bulldog? Is that your and did you run into Kyle Schwarber there, or was he too busy taking selfies and hugging babies and giving pregame speeches
Yeah.
at points?
Yeah, so I'm a huge Georgia fan. Grew up
Okay.
obviously 45 minutes away from Athens. One of my best friends played football at Georgia. Like, grew up a huge Georgia fan. But also my family's from my dad's from Miami and my mom's from Fort Lauderdale. So like they grew up obviously when Miami through the 90s, 2000s, like 80s, 90s, 2000 when they were just unbelievable. And so my dad and my brother are huge Miami fans, and so that was the whole reason why we went. Because my brother, I mean, he's diehard. Like he's lives and dies. Like Miami loses on Saturday, his next week's kind of ruined type of thing. And so, um, yeah, so we went to the game and it was unreal. I mean, obviously that was a really fun environment. But yes, I did get to see Schwarber while I was there. We made a little friendly wager that I unfortunately lost, but yeah, it was cool. It was that was the first time I met him, which was cool. And we actually sat. He sat like 5 or 6 rows right behind us, so it was great. We had a great time.
Wow, that's awesome, and a great game too.
Yeah.
Um, Listen, Brad, this was great. All those years in the American League, I'm not sure how much Phillies fans know about you, but they're going to get to know you really well, I think, this season and next year. And I know it's busy. You're trying to get all your work in here before you go meet up with Team USA. So you're very gracious to carve out a few minutes for us here. I know I'll see you before you leave, but best of luck in the WBC. And I'll see you in Miami in a few weeks for the semifinals and finals. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, sir. Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thanks again for being my guest here on Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I want to thank Brad Keller again for joining me this week. It's time now to open my reporter's notebook, and as usual, I'll touch on 3 things that are on my mind here in Phillies camp. First, here's my annual reminder to everyone who gets worked up about spring training games. They don't count. Not really. I mean, yes, they do keep stats in the Grapefruit League, but hits don't carry over into the season. Strikeouts are a little more than a sugar rush for pitchers. You win some, you lose some, you even tie some, and everyone's record will reset on March 25th. But what do you do if you're Dylan Moore? A veteran of 7 major league seasons, mostly with the Seattle Mariners, the 33-year-old utility man must have a good camp to make the Phillies opening day roster after signing a minor league contract. So I went over to Moore's locker the other day and asked how he's going to approach these games, knowing that in one sense, they aren't really real, but in another, they probably hold the key to him getting a major league job. It's a good question, Moore said. I think the competitor in me will never be able to not take as much pride as I do in the game and play as hard as I can. You want to see where you're at, which is why you never want to go less than 100% just because it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And to make an impression, you have to be able to take it seriously and play like it's a game that's meaningful. Because for me, it is. I want to make a good impression so I can make the team and help this team win. Barring injuries, and that's a necessary caveat at this time of year, the Phillies will have 2 competitions for bench jobs. One is between backup catchers Rafael Marchand and Garrett Stubbs. The other is for the final spot on the roster. The Phillies could go with Yohan Rojas, who would fill a role as a pinch runner and a defensive replacement in the outfield. But there's not as much need for the latter without Nick Castellanos around. Brandon Marsh, Justin Crawford, and especially Adolis Garcia are all strong outfield defenders. Also, Rojas has minor league options and might benefit from everyday at-bats in AAA. Veteran outfielder Brian Dela Cruz is interesting as a right-handed hitter with power, but the Phillies are already set to have 2 righties on the bench with Edmundo Sosa and Otto Kemp, and Dela Cruz lacks positional versatility. Then there's Moore, who has played everywhere except catcher and did win a Gold Glove as a utility man for the Mariners back in 2023. He told me he signed with the Phillies to work with hitting coach Kevin Long, but he also recognizes an opportunity. He said, and I quote, "In past experience, having 2 utility guys, one who's more depth to the infield and one who's more depth to the outfield is huge. A guy that can do both is great. Sosa plays an awesome infield everywhere you put him, so maybe I could be more of the outfield guy. This has been my career in a nutshell. Play some, play not so much, and just stay ready. I feel like I've gotten pretty good at it, and I still have more in me, unquote. Mark it down. It'll be one of the more meaningful elements of largely meaningless spring training games. Second, 6 years into his major league career, Alec Bohm knows who he is as a player. He also knows who he's not. In the grand scheme of things, Bohm told me, I'm prototypically not your average cleanup hitter. Body type-wise, yeah, but the way my game is, I guess, it's not. I'm not that typical. It's not that of a typical four hitter. It's true. Bohm looks the part, 6'5" with shoulders that block the sun. But he hasn't hit more than 20 homers or slugged .450 in a full season. And yet, he was the Phillies' most frequent cleanup hitter over the last 2 seasons, and is the leading candidate to reprise that role on opening day this year. It's an important role, too, because regardless of whether Rob Thompson keeps Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper in the number 2 and 3 spots or flips them, the cleanup hitter will be protecting one or the other. As Harper put it, whoever's in that 4 spot is going to have a big job to do. I asked Bohm if he ever tires of hearing the familiar gripe that someone as big and strong as he is doesn't hit more balls over the fence. I thought his answer was telling. He said, quote, anybody that says that has no bleeping clue how hard this game is and how good the pitching is at this point. Would you rather me swing at stuff that's bouncing in front of the plate and strike out 180 times and get you 25 to 30 home runs so you feel better about it? Or do you want me to hit 280 and drive in 80 to 90 to 100 runs and hit 40 doubles and do it that way? To me, that's more productive than me walking up there and striking out 190 times. That's not my game. Now, Bohm concedes that his game was down last year. After struggling in April, he started to come around before cracking a rib after the All-Star break and missing a month. In September, he missed 10 days because of a cyst in his shoulder that needed to be drained. He wound up with only 18 doubles, 11 homers, and a .741 OPS. But Bohm drove in 97 runs in back-to-back seasons in 2023 and 24 and believes he can get back to that level again. He certainly has millions of incentives with free agency looming after the season. I don't really think about that, Bohm said. Just in my mind, that's really far off in the distance. It's at the end of the season, but that feels very far away to me at this point standing here in spring training. I'm just more worried about what I can do right now, where I'm at right now. I can't tell you what things are going to be like in June. I can't control any of that at this point. Finally, there's a cloud that will hang over everything that happens in baseball this season. The collective bargaining agreement expires on December 1st, and when that happens, most people expect the owners will lock out the players just as they did back in 2022. It's a negotiating tactic while the sides hammer out a new deal. But the real question is whether an agreement can be reached in time to avoid losing any games in the 2027 season. And there isn't much optimism, according to a lot of folks on both sides of the aisle. The owners are expected to push for a salary cap, similar to what exists in the NFL, NBA, and NHL. The players have historically resisted any cap on wages, and as long as both sides dig in on their respective stances, we could be in for a prolonged fight. Now, there was news last week on the players' side. Union Executive Director Tony Clark was asked to step down by the 8-player executive subcommittee after a union investigation uncovered an alleged relationship between Clark and his sister-in-law, whom he hired for a job with the Players Association in 2023. Clark also is under federal investigation for misuse of union funds. It's a shakeup within the union ranks, to be sure, but the players voted to install Bruce Meyer as interim executive director. Meyer was the union's lead negotiator in the last round of CBA negotiations in 2022-23. He's known as a hardliner and is very much against a salary cap. In uniting behind Meyer, the players would seem to be presenting a strong front. And so the sides will continue to stake out their positions. Negotiations are expected to begin after the regular season opens at the end of March, and everything that happens in the sport in 2026, from the All-Star game in Philadelphia in July through the playoffs in October, will be framed through the prism of the labor uncertainty that looms at the end of the year. We're going to be talking about it a lot, so stay tuned. Okay, it's time now to play Hit and Run, where we take a question from you out there. Want to join the conversation? Drop me an email at slauber@inquirer.com or reach out on the social media platform of your choice, X, Blue Sky, Facebook, Instagram, threads, etc. Or you can always drop a line in the comments section on YouTube as well. This week's question comes from Gary Opramola, who sends along this email. Wouldn't it make sense to have a guy that doesn't strike out much, hits 285, puts the ball in play, hits to right field, and doesn't hit many home runs, and have him bat second? I don't get all the panic about Schwarber possibly not getting up in the first inning. He would drive in more runs for the year and provide the best possible protection for Bryce Harper. He still strikes out about 200 times. My lineup would be Turner, Bohm, Harper, Schwarber, Garcia, Marsh, Realmuto, Stott, Crawford. Even though it's not right-left at the top four, it is through the next five. Bohm is not suited for cleanup, and I don't think he likes the pressure, as indicated by his sensitivity about the possible decision. Your thoughts? Thanks, Gary, for the question. So essentially, you're advocating for Bohm to bat second and Schwarber to hit cleanup, and I do see some sense in that. But generally speaking, my theory on lineup construction is this. Don't overthink it. You want your three best hitters to bat in the first three spots in the lineup. Whenever the Phillies can get Turner, Harper, Schwarber to the plate 5 times apiece in a game, they stand the best chance of winning. You might be wondering, what's the difference between batting third and fourth? Well, based on the numbers, a player who bats third will typically get 15 to 20 more plate appearances per year than a player who bats fourth, which might not sound like much until you consider that Schwarber homered once every 10.8 at-bats last season. Not only that, in Harper's case, it doesn't much matter who bats behind him, at least in my opinion. Remember last year when the Phillies put Schwarber behind Harper 2 weeks into the season because they hoped to better protect Harper? They kept it that way for a month until Harper went on the injured list with wrist inflammation. And, well, Harper actually saw fewer pitches per plate appearance with Schwarber behind him. I remember talking to Harper about it in May, and he couldn't be more surprised. The point was, Harper said, he's the hitter in the Phillies lineup that teams aren't going to let beat them. It has always been this way throughout his career, even going back to youth baseball. Harper saw the lowest rate of pitches in the zone of any hitter in the majors last season at 43%. But over his first 6 seasons with the Phillies, with a bunch of different guys hitting behind him, he saw an average of 42.6% of pitches in the zone. So this is nothing new. The problem last year was that Harper swung at a career-high rate of pitches out of the zone, about 35%. So as hitting coach Kevin Long said when he appeared on Phillies Extra during the offseason, if Harper is more disciplined about swinging at better pitches and taking his walks, it will force pitchers to come in the zone more often. Or maybe they won't. But it's less about who bats behind Harper, whether it's Bohm or Adolis Garcia or even Kyle Schwarber, than it is about Harper himself. Let's leave it there this week and remind you that you can listen to this episode and most others on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Just go to Phillies Extra, give us a follow, and while you're there, please rate and review us. It really does help the show. You can watch the show on the Inquirer's YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And great news, there is a new dedicated Phillies Extra page on Inquirer.com. Just go to Inquirer.com/topic/Phillies-Extra. Bookmark it, and voila, all the episodes are archived there. It's an easy way to catch up on any interviews that you've missed. Thanks again to my guest this week, Brad Keller. And thanks, as always, to our producers, Angelica Irizarry and Mariam Akraz. I'm running around here in Florida, and they always do a great job of juggling their schedules to help make sure the show sounds and looks as good as possible. Most of all, though, thanks so much to you out there for listening, watching, and, of course, for reading the Philadelphia Inquirer. We'll see you next week.